All right, we're in 1A and we're working on logic. Okay, so what is logic? Logic is the study of the methods and principles of reasoning. It can be useful in providing strong support for conclusions and to help identify errors in reasoning or fallacies. A. How do we define argument? What is the basic structure of an argument? How do we define argument? An argument is a reasoned or thoughtful process. An argument is a reasoned or thoughtful process. What's the basic structure of an argument? You have some premises, and then these premises lead to a conclusion. An argument consists of premises that are used to support a conclusion. What is a fallacy? Give examples of fallacies and describe how their argument is deceptive. What is a fallacy? A fallacy is a deceptive argument. It is an argument in which the conclusion is not well supported by the premises. Which of the following fallacies describe how each choice is deceptive? Company A makes the best pickup trucks in the world. More people drive Company A pickup trucks than any other light truck. This argument is deceptive because the fact that the large number of trucks people buy does not necessarily mean that they are the best trucks. That is certainly true, so that's a fallacy. Society has an obligation to provide health insurance because health care is a right of citizenship. This argument is deceptive because the premise and the conclusion essentially say the same thing. That is also a fallacy. I placed the quartz crystal on my forehead, and in 5 minutes my headache was gone. The crystal made my headache go away. This argument is deceptive because it claims that because one thing happened before another, the first event caused the second event, but it doesn't prove that there's any connection between the two events. That is also a fallacy. The patient is still breathing. He must still be alive. That is true, so that is not a fallacy. A, B, and C. Decide whether the following statement makes sense or is clearly true and does not make sense or is clearly false. Explain your reasoning. In order to present a logical argument to Andrea, Julian had to shout at her. This statement does not make sense. Shouting a logical argument does not improve the argument. Decide whether the following statement makes sense or is clearly true or does not make sense or is clearly false and explain your reasoning. I disagree with your conclusion, so your argument must contain a fallacy. This statement does not make sense. Unconvincing arguments do not always contain a fallacy. Consider the following example of the logical fallacy of appeal to popularity. Complete parts A and B below. Apple's iPhones outsell all other smartphones, so it must be the best smartphone on the market. What is the premise? The premise is Apple's iPhones outsell all other smartphones. What is the conclusion? The conclusion is the second statement, so it must be the best smartphone on the market. Briefly explain how appeal to popularity occurs in the argument. Choose the correct answer below. We cannot conclude that the popularity of the iPhone caused it to be the best smartphone on the market. We're not really thinking about causal effects. This conclusion was drawn from an inaccurate number of cases. No, the fact that many people buy the iPhone does not necessarily mean it is the best smartphone on the market. Appeal to popularity. Consider the following example of a fallacy. Complete parts A and B. Identify 50 years of searching has not revealed life on other planets, so life in the universe must be confined to Earth only. The premise is 50 years of searching has not revealed life on other planets. Conclusion, life in the universe must be confined to Earth. That was the premise with the conclusion. Briefly describe how the stated fallacy occurs in the argument. The premise is stated according to a lack of evidence of the opposite of the conclusion. So the opposite of the conclusion here is that there's life as everywhere else, and so we haven't been able to prove that yet, and so that just means that we haven't found if there's any life elsewhere. So that the first statement is stated according to the opposite of the last statement. That makes it a fallacy. Consider the following example of a fallacy. Complete parts A and B below. He refused to testify by invoking his Fifth Amendment rights, so he must be guilty. The premise is that he refused to testify by invoking his Fifth Amendment rights. So that's either B or C. He refused to testify by invoking his. He may not be guilty. No, it was that he must be guilty. Briefly describe how the stated fallacy occurs in their argument. The conclusion is stated as if it were the only possible conclusion. I really like that one. The conclusion is stated as if it were caused by the premise. No, it's not caused. The conclusion is stated as if it was no. The conclusion stated is no, it's A. There might be some other reasons other than being guilty that he did this. Consider the following example of a fallacy and complete parts A through C below. Personal attack. Senator Smith's bill on agricultural policy is a sham because he has accepted contributions from companies that sell genetically modified crop seeds. The premise is, the choices are here. Senator Smith has accepted contributions from companies that sell genetically modified crop seeds. So that's done. The conclusion is that his bill is a sham. Briefly describe how the stated fallacy occurs in the argument. A claim about Senator Smith's personal behavior is used to criticize the bill. I like that one. The argument attempts to divert attention from the real issue by focusing on another issue. Not really. The argument attempts to evoke an emotional response rather than evidence to support the conclusion. Okay. Not really. The argument is based on the distortion of what he said. No, that's wrong too. A. Which of the following is another example of a personal attack? Joe insists that his favorite band is better than Megan's since his is less popular, and everyone knows that the only way musicians become popular is by selling out. That's not insulting. Mayor Carmen wants to increase taxes on the wealthier members of her community to help pay for the construction of a new hospital. Her opponent says that Carmen wants to punish people for being successful. That's not an insult. You know you can trust me since I'm not a liar. Harold went to every practice meet for his track team and made sure to exercise. After he beat Franklin in a race, Franklin insists that Harold must have cheated. That is a personal attack. Consider the following example of a fallacy completes part A and B below. Good grades are needed to get into college, and a college diploma is necessary for a good career. Therefore, attendance should count in high school grades. The premise is that good grades are needed to get into college, and college diploma is necessary for a good career. Good grades are needed to get into college. No. Grades are needed to get and college. Okay, conclusion. Attendance should. I like B. Briefly describe how the stated fallacy occurs in the argument. Choose the correct answer below. The conclusion is stated as if it were caused by the premise. The conclusion is stated as if it were the only possible conclusion. No, the premise is stated as the opposite, as the conclusion. No, the premise directs attention away from the conclusion. I like D. Right, so these things really don't have anything to do with it. So it was talking about college, and then we're talking about attendance in high school. Consider the following example of the logical fallacy of straw man. Complete parts A and B below. The mayor wants to raise taxes to fund social programs, so she must not believe in the value of hard work. What is the premise? The mayor wants to raise taxes to fund social programs. The conclusion is she must not believe in the value of hard work. Before we explain how a straw man occurs, choose the correct answer below. The conclusion is a restatement of the premise. No. It artificially precludes choices that ought to be considered. The mayor is characterized perhaps wrongly by one quality on which the conclusion is based. This is a personal attack on the mayor, so it's called a straw man. C is the answer. A straw man is when you use one character to make a conclusion about the statement. Hope it helps.